Daniel 1:1-2 says, in the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand with some of the articles of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar to the house of his God. And he brought the articles into the treasure house of his God. This is the introduction to what we will be studying today as we begin to incorporate the Old Testament prophets into our study of the book of Revelation. We're beginning with the visions of Daniel, that if you have been reading anything in your book of Revelation, you will see a lot of similarities in the language and in the description of the beasts and the things that take place. And so we're going to begin with Daniel, and I will be combining into one matrix Daniel and Revelation, and then we will incorporate some of the other 300 or so references in Revelation to the Old Testament prophets into that matrix. I've decided that since Daniel is the leading reference for the Revelation, that I should go ahead and create a matrix of the two, and then that way we can utilize that framework for the incorporation of other prophets, other prophecies, and descriptions. Let's begin with the word of prayer, and we'll start our study. Father Yahuah, we are grateful for the opportunity to look at your word and worship you in that way. We ask that you show us the clarity of your word, show us the significance of your word, and show us the application of your word, both in the text that we study and in our own lives, so that we might understand better the spiritual life that you have provided for us in the age in which we live. We ask your blessings on it in the name of Yahushua HaMashiach, Jesus, our Savior. Amen. A little background on the book of Daniel. First of all, in the passage we read, notice a couple of things. One, that Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, laid siege to the city of Jerusalem. And secondly, that the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into Nebuchadnezzar's hand. God has a plan. Even when it looks like things are bad, it is all part of God's divine knowledge and is part of his divine decree that these things take place. It is for a purpose, and we'll see the purpose as we go along in our study, but essentially it is the fact that Israel had once again played the harlot and had sought after foreign gods, and therefore had left the husband God of their own, God Yahuah, and had gone off in that way. This is the end of the 7th century and the beginning of the 6th century BC. Babylon had ascended in the Near East. They had defeated the Chaldeans and other tribes around them, and had reached ascendancy at that time in the Middle East, in the Mesopotamian region, and then they had come over and laid siege to Jerusalem. This was approximately 586, 587 that this actually finally took place. And the siege was part of the 3 stages that Nebuchadnezzar utilized in taking Jerusalem. Note from our first introductory reading that they took some of the articles from the temple to Nebuchadnezzar's storehouse for his God, and This, the commentary called the Preacher's Commentary on the book of Daniel says, the humiliation could not have been more patent. Humanly speaking, this was a time when God's glory was discounted and his people were not a testimony to his great name. The siege of Jerusalem was, by the Babylonians, was simply a cross-section of a conflict that runs throughout the entire Bible history, the conflict between the people of God and the people of the world. It can be traced back in scriptures, in this case, to the prototype of totalitarianism, building on the plains of Shinar, of whose city a tower would reach up to the heavens and bring fame and fortune, the Tower of Babel. So we have this coming back to haunt. Recall our Genesis 11 study on God dividing the nations because of the Tower of Babel built by Nimrod. Well, of course, we read in our study of Deuteronomy how the Israelites had failed and failed and failed. And then in 722 BC, the northern kingdom, which had separated from the southern kingdom after the death of Solomon, they had a civil war, and 10 of the tribes formed the northern kingdom and left the two tribes, Judah and Benjamin, in the south, in the region of Judea. And that's why they're known as Jews, is because they were from Judea. It's interesting to note that the term Jews was a pejorative term by foreigners. The Jews always referred to themselves as Israelites. And the only time they referenced Jews was when referencing the southern tribes versus the northern tribes. Israel was their name. They were the children of Israel, the children of Jacob, the sons of Jacob, as promised by God to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So we're incorporating the Old Testament prophets into beginning with Daniel's visions. I am going to give you a brief summary of spirit kind because I understand that it's kind of a confusing issue because of the misidentification of all spirit kind as angels in a great many, if not most, well, in fact, most, if not all, biblical translations. There aren't very many that translate them correctly. So we start off with Elohim. He is the creator. He is Father Yahuah. He is unique among all spirit kind. He is unique and describes thusly by his references in the Old Testament and the New, describing his characteristics, his essence. He is unique among all of the other Elohim. Elohim are spirit beings, okay? And then we have the created spirit kind that are misidentified in the scriptures frequently as angels. They are, well, let's begin with sons of God, the benei Elohim. Sons of God make up the divine council. The benei Elohim are the administrator of God's dominion. And then they also make up, sons of God are also comprise some of the fallen angels, what we call the fallen angels, the fallen benei Elohim, who are located in Tartarus. They are the ones who cohabited with the human females. And that produced the Nephilim that are not a spirit being. Nephilim were a physical hybrid from the angels, the benei Elohim, that came down and cohabited with the women and produced the Nephilim. Then there are the devils, the term devil in the scriptures, And they are the fallen benei Elohim that are not in Tartarus, that are free. And we'll see some of them. Well, in fact, we'll see one of them clearly in the book of, well, two of them clearly in the book of Revelation. Apollyon and Satan are two. And then we see others around in various places. And then we have another spirit kind, and they are demons. They are the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, the Anakim, and the Rephaim. The Nephilim were the originals that came from that were the progeny that came from the hybridization from the benei Elohim who fell from their first estate and cohabited with the women, producing Nephilim. Then Nephilim cohabiting with women again, humankind women again, apparently produced the Anakim and the Rephaim. And that, of course, we saw a great many of the battles that took place between Israel and the inhabitants of the Exodus time, the 40 years in the desert, and then when they came to take the land, there were Anakim and Rephaim were quite prominent. But those are the demons. Now, there's a ranking and a hierarchy to spirit kind, and there are certain references that'll give a greater detail than this, but this is sufficient for us at this point until we get to it in Revelation. I hadn't covered any more than this previously in our studies. The cherubim, those are the throne guardians. As we know, there's Michael and Gabriel and then some others that are mentioned in our study of Enoch. You saw them. It was Raphael and another one. Can't think of it right now. Okay. They are known quite often as archangels in translations. Then there are the seraphim. They are the fiery angels. And then there are the teraphim, and teraphim are the ones that can appear as humans. They are the lowest of the class of angels, and they can take on the appearance of humans. So it may well have been teraphim that cohabited with the human women. The functions of spirit kind, of course, we have angels. Angels is the job description of the spirit kind. They are the messengers sent by God, the communicators from God. And of course, because of the fall of the angelic realm, the rebellion, the volitional rebellion by the spirit kind, some of the part of the spirit kind, they become messengers or communicators from Satan and his hierarchy. And then we have what are called the watchers. The watchers are the human affairs representative spirit beings. We will see them today, and that's why I'm giving you this introduction or this summary of spirit kind, because we're going to see watchers come up in our study here in a few minutes. They're also known as guardian angels. We refer to them as guardian angels if they're good watchers. If they're bad watchers, then they wouldn't be your guardian angel. They would be a tormenting angel or a tormenting Elohim. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and start into our look at watchers. We last saw the watchers in our study of the book of First Enoch, a book not accepted as canonical, but clearly referenced in a canonical book named Daniel. This is Daniel 4:13. This is King Nebuchadnezzar's second dream. And this is what he says. I saw in the visions of my head as I lay in bed, and behold, a watcher, a holy one, come down from heaven. He said, the watcher said, the sentence is by the decree of the watchers. the decision by the word of the holy ones, to the end that the living may know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men and gives it to whom he will, and sets over it the lowliest of men. So we see here the revelation of how the spirit kind relate to humankind in the higher echelons of activity, the non-demonic activity. Demons wish to possess individuals. That's their desires, to have a body to function with, because they have no body. Okay, I just received a chat message that the slides are not moving. Is that everyone's experience? Let me see here if I can get us going again here. Okay.
He's having trouble, Mary.
I'm restarting
He's restarting.
keynotes, and let's see now. Okay, they are now. Okay, good. Very good. All right. Here actually is a little introductory slide that I had prepared just to give you an idea of what's going on, and we'll do that. Okay. Deanna, did you read that chat? That says you need to mute your audio. I thought I had everyone muted.
To you.
But we'll get all of this taken care of.
You set up your computer. You bring your books. You bring your crap and be ready on time, and not 2 seconds before.
Housekeeping.
Just makes me nervous and gets me mad before we even get started.
Okay. That should have taken care of that problem. Okay, here's that slide. Sorry for the interruption here. Daniel's from the tribe of Judah. And he was taken in the Babylonian captivity along with others in 586 BC when the temple was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar, who then took some of the implements that he could find. Some of them were hidden and he couldn't find them, but he took a great many of the implements with him back to Babylon. And then I made the reference there that Israel, the northern kingdom, the 10 tribes, were taken a couple hundred years earlier in the Assyrian captivity. And they are what we call the 10 lost tribes, even though they're not lost. They were lost at that time, but they're not lost anymore. As a matter of fact, I was just doing some research the other day, and they say that there is a huge movement in the nation of Israel, people going to have DNA testing to determine their tribal affiliation, which tribe they are part of. So that appears to be a trend in Israel at this time. All right, back to Daniel 2 is where we're going now. This is King Nebuchadnezzar's first dream, and Daniel is rushed in to interpret it. None of the Chaldean wise men, none of the seers and sages and practitioners of the occult could interpret Nebuchadnezzar's dream. And someone remembered Daniel, and so Arioch, one of the officials in Nebuchadnezzar's court, went to get Daniel. He brought Daniel before the king in haste and said thus to him, I have found among the exiles from Judah a man who will make known to the king the interpretation. The king declared to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, are you able to make known to me the dream that I have seen and its interpretation? Daniel's name had been changed to a good Babylonian name, so that it was much easier to speak to him. So they gave him the short name Belteshazzar. So Belteshazzar is how Daniel is referenced in some passages. So remember that if it comes up in any of these translations that we look at from here on out. But that's Daniel, and the king says, are you able to make known to me the dream that I have seen and its interpretation? See, Nebuchadnezzar had put these people to the test, all of these seers, because he had received false interpretations of dreams previously from these fakers and occult practitioners. So he then started a new policy. Not only do you have to give the interpretation, you have to tell me what my dream was. Well, I don't know if any of you have seen, and I'm sure you have, the mind readers and those kind of people who do it as an act in Las Vegas, or they used to have them on TV quite often, on TV shows where they would read things. One I recall, and I guess I recall it because I had a banana for breakfast this morning. One of them that I saw had an audience full of people, and he handed a banana to some of the people sitting in the first row and said, I'm going to watch you peel the banana, and that the way you peel a banana will tell me a lot about you. And so I'm going to tell you about yourself based on how you peel the banana. And so he watched the first lady peel the banana, and he went on to tell her all about her nature and the way things she said, the way she did things and so on. And she was just astounded, and the audience was astounded. Well, that's a technique that's used, and there are books you can buy on how you do that, because you basically do things that really apply to everyone, but people who you're addressing will think, well, you understand them. It's kind of like the horoscopes you see in the newspapers. If you forgot where you were when you were born, you could read any of the horoscopes in the newspaper and think that it applied to you, because they are generalized so that they do not specifically state things that would give it away that they're not really doing what they say. So that's what was happening here with the Chaldeans and the other seers, the other people who were into the occult and claimed to be able to tell things. So Nebuchadnezzar said, tell me my dream. Don't tell me the interpretation. Tell me my dream, and then tell me the interpretation. Well, none of them could do it. And so that's why Nebuchadnezzar says to Daniel, or Belteshazzar, are you able to make known to me the dream that I have seen and its interpretation? That's the big test. Daniel answered the king and said, no wise men, enchanters, magicians, or astrologers can show to the king the mystery that the king has asked. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. This interpretation will be important in our understanding of the future of Israel and our study of the end times. What I'm doing here is I am dumping out of the box the puzzle, and I'm starting to organize the pieces. Back when I had time to work puzzles, we would, of course, try to find the corner pieces and then the outside boundary pieces, and then other ways of taking the pieces that you find and putting them together based on color or shapes or things in them. And that's what I'm doing here in our study now, is I have dumped out the puzzle pieces and I am starting to organize them so that we can put it together. That's why I say this interpretation will be important in our understanding of the future of Israel and our study of the end times. So Daniel says to him, your dream and the visions of your head as you lay in bed are these. To you, O king, as you lay in bed came thoughts of what would be after this, and he who reveals mysteries made known to you what it is to be. But as for me, this mystery has been revealed to me, not because of any wisdom that I have more than all the living, but in order that the interpretation may be made known to the king, and that you may know the thoughts of your mind. You saw, O king, and behold, a great image. This image, mighty and of exceeding brightness, stood before you, and its appearance was frightening. The head of this image was of fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its middle and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. And here's the I don't know how well this shows up in your notes to be able to see it, but this is what he saw: the head of fine gold, the breast and arms of silver, the belly and thighs of bronze, then the legs from the knees down of iron, and feet that were made partly of iron and partly of clay. And then he also saw a rock that was not cut out of a mountain, but a rock none the same, and that rock will play a part as well. As you looked, a stone was cut out by no human hand, and it struck the image on its feet of iron and clay and broke them in pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold all together were broken in pieces and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors. And the wind carried them away so that not a trace of them could be found. But the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. This was the dream. Now we will tell the king its interpretation. You, O king, the king of kings, to whom the God of heaven has given the wisdom, the power, and the might, and the glory. So who set Nebuchadnezzar up? Well, obviously, God has. And into whose hand he has given, wherever they dwell, the children of man, the beasts of the field, and the birds of the heavens, making you rule over them all. You are the head of gold. Another kingdom inferior to you shall arise after you, and yet a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. And there shall be a fourth kingdom as strong as iron, because iron breaks to pieces and shatters all things. And like iron that crushes, it shall break and crush all these. And as you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, it shall be a divided kingdom, but some of the firmness of iron shall be in it, just as you saw iron mixed with the soft clay. Pardon me. And as the toes of the feet were partly iron and partly clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly brittle. As you saw the iron mixed with soft clay, so they will mix with one another in marriage, but they will not hold together, just as iron does not mix with clay. This has been taken as a prophecy and relates to the sons of God, the benei Elohim, mating with the female humans to create Nephilim. They will mix with one another in marriage, but they will not hold together, just as iron does not mix with clay. So we see here what is taken by many to be a prophecy of what's going to happen to that last kingdom, that iron kingdom. And in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed, nor shall the kingdom be left to another people. It'll never be destroyed. It'll never be conquered. It shall break in pieces all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, and it shall stand forever. Just as you saw that a stone was cut from a mountain by no human hand, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold. A great God has made known to the king what shall be after this. The dream is certain, and its interpretation sure. So here is the explanation of who those kingdoms are and when. The Babylonian Empire, 606 BC, the head of gold. The chest and arms of silver, the Medo-Persian Empire that took over in 536. And then the bronze, the Greek Empire, Alexander the Great, 330 BC. And then the iron in 27 BC, the Roman Empire succeeded the Greek Empire. And then the iron and the clay, end times. There are those who say that it is partially Roman Empire mixed with something else. Others choose not to identify it at all because of its nature that's different than the iron legs. And we shall uncover reasons and explanations of that as we go further in our study coming up in future sessions. All right, so Daniel is promoted because of his ability to relate the dream and then to interpret it. So then King Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face and paid homage to Daniel and commanded that an offering and incense be offered up to him. The king answered and said to Daniel, "Truly your God is God of gods and Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries, for you have been able to reveal this mystery." Then the king gave Daniel high honors, many great gifts, and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon and chief prefect over all the wise men of Babylon. Kind of like the story of Joseph, right? Okay. Now here's another story you might know from Sunday school as we continue on with the remainder of that chapter. Daniel made a request of the king, and he appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel remained at the king's court. This will show up again later, of course. Daniel requested that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be appointed as vice regents of the province of Babylon to actually go out to the provinces or to the province, to the major cities and to be regents over them so that Daniel could stay back at the king's court itself to keep an eye on things there and fulfill his mission as the prophet of God. Now we jump ahead to chapter 3, and chapter 3, as probably most of you know, follows chapter 2. And so not much time has taken place here in the intervening space. And look what happens. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold, whose height was 60 cubits, and its breadth 6 cubits. He set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Then King Nebuchadnezzar sent to gather the satraps, the prefects, and the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces gathered for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and the herald proclaimed aloud, "You are commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, you are to fall down and worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up." See, it doesn't look like Nebi quite understood what Daniel was trying to get to, what he was trying to say about the image that he had dreamed about. He said, "Oh, I'm the head of gold. Okay, I'll make a gold statue, and everyone can worship me." After saying, "Surely your God is the God of gods, the Lord of kings." But now he says, "But I am this mighty king you have talked about, that you have described when you addressed me. So I'm going to set up my own little statue here. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace." Therefore, as soon as all the peoples heard the sound of the horn, the pipe, the lyre, the trigon, and the harp, and the bagpipe, and every kind of music, all the peoples, nations, and languages fell down and worshiped the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Therefore, at that time, certain Chaldeans came forward and maliciously accused the Jews. There are thousands of Jews who have been taken captive following the siege of Jerusalem, and Chaldeans aren't too happy about it, especially since Daniel has shown them up by his revealing of the dream and the interpretation of the dream. So these certain Chaldeans came forward and maliciously accused the Jews. They declared to King Nebuchadnezzar, "O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that every man who hears the sound of the horn, the pipe, the lyre, the trigon, the harp, and the bagpipe, and every kind of music shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into a burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom you have appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon, specifically Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, pay no attention to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up." So there we go with the people not happy with their administrators. So they have to come up with a way to get rid of them. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in a furious rage, commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought. So they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said to them, "Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up? Now, if you are ready, when you hear the sound of the horn, the pipe, the lyre, the trigon, the harp, the bagpipe, and every kind of music, to fall down and worship the image that I have made, well and good. But if you do not worship, you shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands?" Good question, Nebi. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If this be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. See, God is able to answer the prayers, but he may not answer it with a yes. He may not answer it the way you have requested. And this is a good illustration of how we are to handle those situations. But if not, will not serve your gods, worship the golden image that you have set up. Have a friend who is pretty dear to me. He related to me one day when I was talking to him that he had taken every religious thing down in his house and thrown them away because his daughter was quite ill, and he prayed fervently to God to heal her, and God did not heal her. She died. And so he lost his faith in God because of that. If he had known this response, this way of understanding how God works, then he would have not done that. So then Nebuchadnezzar was filled with fury, and the expression of his face was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times more than it was usually heated. And he ordered some of the mighty men of his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their cloaks, their tunics, and their hats, and their other garments, and they were thrown into the burning fiery furnace. Because the king's order was urgent and the furnace overheated, the flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell bound into the burning fiery furnace. Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished and rose up in haste. He was sitting there watching this, probably on a portable throne. And he rose up in haste. He declared to his counselors, "Did we not cast 3 men bound into the fire?" They answered and said to the king, "True, O king." He answered and said, "But I see 4 men unbound walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods." Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the door of the burning fiery furnace. He declared, "Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here." Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out from the fire, and the satraps, the prefects, the governors, and the king's counselors gathered together and saw that the fire had not had any power over the bodies of those men. The hair of their heads was not singed, their cloaks were not harmed, and no smell of fire had come upon them. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants, who trusted him and set aside the king's command and yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I make a decree. Any people, nation, or language that speaks anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses laid in ruins. For there is no other God who is able to rescue in this way." Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. There's sufficient evidence here to see that Nebuchadnezzar became a believer in Yahuah, the the God of Israel. And this chapter 4 is one of those evidences. King Nebuchadnezzar, to all peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied to you. It has seemed good to me to show the signs and wonders that the Most High God has done for me. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at ease in my house and prospering in my palace. I saw a dream that made me afraid. As I lay in bed, the fancies and the visions of my head alarmed me. So I made a decree that all the wise men of Babylon should be brought before me, that they might make known to me the interpretation of the dream. This is the backstory to where we began when the Holy Watcher came. Then the magicians, the enchanters, the Chaldeans, and the astrologers came in, and I told them the dream, but they could not make known to me its interpretation. At last Daniel came in before me, he who was named Belteshazzar, after the name of my God, and in whom is the spirit of the holy gods, that is Elohim. So that could be the spirit of Elohim there, would be the correct translation of that. And I told him the dream, saying, O Belteshazzar, chief of the magicians, because I know that the spirit of Elohim is in you, and that no mystery is too difficult for you, tell me the visions of my dream that I saw and their interpretation. The visions of my head as I lay in bed were these. I saw, and behold, a tree in the midst of the earth, and its height was great. The tree grew and became strong, and its top reached to heaven, and it was visible to the end of the whole earth. Its leaves were beautiful, and its fruit abundant, and in it was good food for all. So after all that Nebuchadnezzar has been through with Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, he has another dream. And it's about a tree. The beasts of the field found shade under it, and the birds of the heavens lived in its branches. So he's got this other dream, and he's wondering how to go with this. And here we are in verse 13, where we had started our story in the beginning. I saw in the visions of my head as I lay in bed, and behold, a watcher, a holy one, came down from heaven. He proclaimed aloud and said thus, chop down the tree and lop off its branches, strip off its leaves and scatter its fruit. Let the beasts flee from under it and the birds from its branches, but leave the stump of its roots in the earth, bound with a band of iron and bronze amid the tender grass of the field. Let him be wet with the dew of heaven. Let his portion be with the beasts in the grass of the earth. Kind of a change there in the way it talks. It's talking about the tree, but leave the stump of its roots in the earth, bound with a band of iron and bronze amid the tender grass of the field. And then it switched to let him be wet with the dew of heaven. Let his portion be with the beasts in the grass of the earth. Let his mind be changed from a man's, and let a beast's mind be given to him. And let 7 periods of time pass over him. The sentence is by decree of the watchers, the decision by the word of the holy ones, the Elohim, to the end that the living may know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men and gives it to whom he will and sets it over the lowliest of men, or sets over it the lowliest of men. That's you, Nebuchadnezzar. You've messed up again, Nebuchadnezzar. At the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up my eyes to heaven, and my reason returned to me. You see, 7 years Nebuchadnezzar had the mind of a beast, and he roamed in the field eating grass and leaves and so on as his punishment because of his sin against the Most High God. And now we pick up in verse 34 here. At the end of the days, the end of the time period, the 7 time period there, 7 years. I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted my eyes to the heaven, and my reason returned to me. And I blessed the Most High and praised and honored him who lives forever. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are accounted as nothing, and he does according to his will among the host of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth. And none can stay his hand or say to him, "What have you done?" At the same time, my reason returned to me, and for the glory of my kingdom, my majesty and splendor returned to me. My counselors and my lords sought me, and I was established in my kingdom, and still more greatness was added to me. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, for all his works are right, and his ways are just, and those who walk in pride he is able to humble, as Nebuchadnezzar found out for 7 years. Okay, so Nebuchadnezzar's back, but now we pick up another story. This is a story that took place while Nebuchadnezzar was out of commission. His son assumed the kingship, took over the throne. So we move forward to Nebuchadnezzar's son, Belshazzar. Not Daniel, but Belshazzar. This is now chapter 5. This section is entitled The Handwriting on the Wall. King Belshazzar made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords and drank wine in front of the thousands. He was probably celebrating his kingship, his ascendancy to the throne, once he determined that his dad was gone and not coming back. His dad was now non-compos mentis. He was now crazy and out in the field eating grass and acting like an animal. So Belshazzar apparently had a feast of celebration for 1,000 of his lords, and he drank wine in front of the 1,000. And Belshazzar, when he tasted the wine, commanded that the vessels of gold and of silver that Nebuchadnezzar his father had taken out of the temple in Jerusalem be brought, that the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines might drink from them. Okay. This was a pretty common kind of thing that was done when a country was defeated in order to demonstrate the superiority of the gods of the conquering nations. They would take the items from the temples, the religious places of the conquered nation, and they would use them in celebrations like this in order to demonstrate that their gods were greater than the God of the conquered peoples. So he brought out the vessels of gold and silver. Just remember what Nebuchadnezzar had said before this about how great the God of heaven was, and that he was the God of gods and all of that. Belshazzar, the son, did not agree. Then they brought in the golden vessels that had been taken out of the temple, the house of God in Jerusalem, and the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines drank from them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. What did they do when they drank them? They drank wine from those stolen vessels and praised the gods of gold and silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. You see, that's all that all of these wars were about. Remember when God told Moses in Deuteronomy 32, that I'll not wipe out all of the people, and there'll be a thorn in your side, and their gods will be an enticement to you. all, as I have tried to point out repeatedly in our study, but have failed to do much of it today, all of this is spiritual warfare. It's all about the Elohim of Elohims, the God of Israel, and the fight between God and the lesser gods, and the people of God versus the people of the lesser gods. It is spiritual warfare based on volitional rebellion. What happens next? Verse 5, immediately the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace opposite the lampstand. And I looked, that's not a menorah. I thought maybe he also had taken a menorah in there. This is a generic word for lampstand that does not indicate that it was a menorah, though I thought it would have been a good idea for the hand to write opposite the menorah, but apparently it did not. I'll probably end up doing some more research just to make sure. And the king saw the hand as it wrote. Then the king's color changed, and his thoughts alarmed him. His limbs gave way, and his knees knocked together. The king called loudly to bring in the enchanters, the Chaldeans, the astrologers. The king declared to the wise men of Babylon, whoever reads this writing and shows me its interpretation shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around his neck and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Well, it seemed to me that Nebuchadnezzar pretty much had made Daniel the third ruler in the kingdom. So I guess Belshazzar had forgotten about that. Then all the king's wise men came in, but they could not read the writing or make known to the king the interpretation. Then King Belshazzar was greatly alarmed, and his color changed, and his lords were perplexed. See, I think that when he saw the hand writing on the wall, his color went from brown, pinkish brown color of his people to ashen white. When they could not tell him what it meant, I think his color changed again from ashen color to a red color of anger. And his lords were perplexed. The queen, because of the words of the king and his lords, came into the banqueting hall, and the queen declared, "O king, live forever. Don't let this bother you. Let not your thoughts alarm you or your color change. There is a man in your kingdom in whom is the spirit of the Elohim," okay, the holy gods, the Elohim. In the days of your father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, were found in him. And King Nebuchadnezzar, your father the king, made him chief of the magicians, enchanters, Chaldeans, and astrologers, because an excellent spirit, knowledge, and understanding to interpret dreams, explain riddles, and solve problems were found in this Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will show the interpretation. Let's go ahead and take our break now, and we'll come back and see what Daniel had to say to the Sun King here, who is perplexed and color changed by this writing on the wall in his banqueting room. So we'll take a short break here. I'm actually trying to stay on time. It is going to be 11 o'clock by the time I finish a short prayer. Father, we are grateful for this study. We're grateful to see the illustration of angelic conflict, of the Elohim rebellion and how it impacts the things that take place in governments and in people's lives. We ask that you give us blessing in the study of it in the name of our Savior, Jesus. Amen. We'll come back at 10 after. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with some of these stories, as the fiery furnace and the Meshach story, and how it was related to you in your Sunday school classes or in sermons. And hopefully you get to see it from a new perspective now as we study it in this manner. And so we're going to go ahead now and see the story of Belshazzar coming up this hour. We left off with slide 44. That said, in the days of your father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, were found in him. And King Nebuchadnezzar, your father the king, I think she had to point that out to him, made him chief of the magicians, enchanters, Chaldeans, and astrologers, because an excellent spirit, knowledge, and understanding to interpret dreams, explain riddles, and solve problems were found in this Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will show the interpretation. So here we go. Then Daniel was brought in before the king. The king answered and said to Daniel, "You are that Daniel, one of the exiles of Judah, whom the king, my father, brought from Judah. I have heard of you that the spirit of the gods is in you. The spirit of the Elohim is in you, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom are found in you. Now the wise men, the enchanters, have been brought in before me to read this writing and make known to me its interpretation. But they could not show the interpretation of the matter. But I have heard that you can give interpretations and solve problems. Now, if you can read the writing and make known to me its interpretation, you shall be clothed with purple, have a chain of gold around your neck, and be the third ruler in the kingdom." Then Daniel answered and said before the king, "Let your gifts be for yourself, and give your rewards to another. Nevertheless, I will read the writing to the king and make known to him the interpretation. O king, the most high God gave Nebuchadnezzar your father kingship and greatness and glory and majesty. And because of the greatness that he gave him, all peoples, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. Whom he would, he killed, and whom he would, he kept alive. Whom he would, he raised up, and whom he would, he humbled. But when his heart was lifted up and his spirit was hardened, so that he dealt proudly, he was brought down from his kingly throne, and his glory was taken from him. He was driven from among the children of mankind, and his mind was made like that of a beast, and his dwelling was with the wild donkeys. He was fed grass like an ox, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, until he knew that the Most High God rules the kingdom of mankind and sets over it whom he will. And you, his son, Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, though you knew all this. But you have lifted up yourself against the Lord of heaven." I don't know that we have anybody in modern day as brave as Daniel to speak against the ultimate authority of any nation and tell them things like this and to castigate. Now they will do it on in speeches, and they will do it in broadcasting, but the face-to-face, where you could have your head chopped off immediately, I don't know that we have those kinds of people. And certainly Daniel had ultimate confidence in the Elohim of Elohims, in Yahuah, who he knew was his source of protection, and if not protection, his refuge and his future. So when he said, "And you, his son Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, though you knew all this, but you have lifted up yourself against the Lord of heaven." You know, a lot of people are like Belshazzar. And I won't ask for a show of hands, but I'm sure that if I did, many of you would raise your hands too, because you've gone through times in your life where you kind of forget who God is and your relationship to him, and you kind of get full of yourself. And as Daniel says, lifted yourself up against the Lord of heaven. So let's see how God deals with Belshazzar. "And the vessels of his house have been brought in before you, and your lords, your wives, and your concubines have drunk wine from them, and you have praised the gods of silver and gold, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which do not see or hear or know, but the God in whose hand is your breath, and whose are all your ways, you have not honored. Then from his presence the hand was sent, and this writing was inscribed." And this is the writing that was inscribed: "Benei, benei, tekel, and parsin." This is the interpretation of the matter. Benei, God has numbered the days of your kingdom and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Peres, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. Then Belshazzar gave the command, and Daniel was clothed with purple. A chain of gold was put around his neck, and a proclamation was made about him that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. I think if I were Belshazzar and I'd just received that message that that I had been found wanting, I'd been measured, and I was found deficient, and my kingdom was going to be given to foreigners, I think I'd be pretty upset, frightened, upset, angry. But he at least followed through with his promise, and he gave the purple clothes, the chain of gold, and a third of the kingship as rulership to Daniel. So it's kind of surprising like that. That very night, Belshazzar, the Chaldean king, was killed, and Darius the Mede received the kingdom, being about 62 years old. That very night, Belshazzar, the Chaldean king, was killed. So maybe Belshazzar just said, "Okay, if that's the way it is, that's the way it is. And I made a promise, I'll keep it, and I'll go to bed and see what happens." And but he was killed that very night, and Darius the Mede received the kingdom, being about 62 years old. So here we again see our image here, and you notice that this is about 536 BC, so about 70 years after the Babylonian Empire had defeated Israel. Judah in this case, not Israel. Israel was defeated by the Assyrians sometime before this, and but the Babylonians defeated Judah, and all of this has taken place sometime during that 70-year period when Medo-Persia takes over for Babylon. So let's see what happens with Darius the Mede. Daniel chapter 6. Daniel serves a second king, Darius. And now we come to that Sunday school story, Daniel and the lion's den. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps to be throughout the whole kingdom, and over them 3 high officials, of whom Daniel was one, to whom these satraps should give an account, so that the king might suffer no loss. Didn't want any thievery going on in the kingdom. Didn't want any funny business, so he had the 120 satraps report to the 3 high officials, and Daniel was one of them. So Darius was a smart man. It was common in those days that when you killed the king of a country, you killed all of the court members as well, because you did not want to have any rebellions take place, counter revolutions, we would call them. And so it was very common for the incoming king to kill not only the previous king, but also all of the members of his court. But Darius, for some reason, did not have Daniel killed and named him one of the high officials. Then this Daniel became distinguished above all the other high officials and satraps because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. Kings would sometimes do that so that they could go off to war or battle and leave someone behind, a trusted, usually a family member, a son or some kind of family member, to be in charge while the king was gone. But Daniel, being highly distinguished, was the one the king had planned to set over the whole kingdom. Then the high officials and satraps sought to find a ground of complaint against Daniel with regard to the kingdom. But they could find no ground for complaint or any fault, because he was faithful and no error or fault was found in him. Then these men said, "We shall not find any ground for complaint against this Daniel unless we find it in connection with the law of his God." Then these high officials and satraps came by agreement to the king and said to him, "O King Darius, live forever." That greeting has been repeated to all these kings several times, and might be something good to institute today. All the high officials of the kingdom, the prefects and the satraps, the counselors and the governors, are agreed that the king should establish an ordinance and enforce an injunction that whoever makes petition to any god or man for 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. Now, O king, establish the injunction and sign the document so that it cannot be changed, according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked. Therefore, King Darius signed the document and injunction. When Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he went to his house, where he had windows in his upper chamber open toward Jerusalem. He got down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as he had done previously. Then these men came by agreement and found Daniel making petition and plea before his God. Then they came near and said before the king concerning the injunction, O king, did you not sign an injunction that anyone who makes petition to any god or man within 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions? The king answered and said, the thing stands fast according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be revoked. Then they answered and said before the king, Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king. Is that exactly what the satraps and the counselors and all the people said about Daniel before? Pays no attention to you, O king, or the injunction you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day. Then the king, when he heard these words, was much distressed and set his mind to deliver Daniel. He set his mind to deliver Daniel from his own irrevocable judgment. And he labored till the sun went down to rescue him. He recognized Daniel to be a man worthy of respect, a man who respected his own Elohim and was highly favored by his Elohim, and therefore Darius wanted to spare him. Then these men came by agreement to the king and said to the king, know, O king, that it is a law of the Medes and Persians that no injunction or ordinance that the king establishes can be changed. You see, they kind of apparently got the idea, the sense that Darius was delaying his order to throw Daniel into the lion's den. And so they thought it best to remind him that, you've got a law and you can't change it. Then the king commanded, and Daniel was brought and cast into the den of lions. The king declared to Daniel, may your God whom you serve continually, deliver you. Okay. So Darius prays for Daniel that Daniel's God will deliver him. And a stone was brought and laid on the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet and with the signet of his lords, that nothing might be changed concerning Daniel. Now, I think there is a bit of a power play that went on there, that the king sealed it with his own signet. That should be adequate. But I think these lords, these satraps and officials wanted their signets on it also, because the king could come back, open the lion's den and rescue Daniel, close it back up again and put his signet on it again, and pretend that nothing had happened. So they wanted their signets on it also, so that they would be certain to know that no tampering had gone on. Then the king went to his palace and spent the night fasting. No diversions were brought to him, and sleep fled from him. Then at break of day, the king arose and went in haste to the den of lions. As he came near to the den where Daniel was, he cried out in a tone of anguish. The king declared to Daniel, "O Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions?" Then Daniel said to the king, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, and they have not harmed me, because I was found blameless before him, and also before you, O king, I have done no harm." Okay. So here we have a messenger from God who shut the lions' mouths, and the lions did not harm Daniel because Daniel was found to be blameless before Elohim and also before King Darius, to whom he had done no harm. Then the king was exceedingly glad and commanded that Daniel be taken up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no kind of harm was found on him because he had trusted in his God. And the king commanded, and those men who had maliciously accused Daniel were brought and cast into the den of lions, they, their children, and their wives. And before they reached the bottom of the den, the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones in pieces. Well, that'll teach them a lesson. I'll bet they'll never do it again. Then King Darius wrote to all the peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth. Peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree that in all my royal dominion, people are to tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed, and his dominion shall be to the end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. He who has saved Daniel from the power of the lions. So this Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. More end time visions approach. Let's look at a vision that Daniel had during the reign of Belshazzar, Nebuchadnezzar's son. It's chapter 7. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions of his head as he lay in his bed. Then he wrote down the dream and told the sum of the matter. Here's where we learn a great deal more. We've learned something about these kingdoms that would arise and fall over the history up until the time of the Messiah, up until the times of Yahuah, Messiah. And so we learned those from the vision of Nebuchadnezzar, the giant statue. So now we're going to learn some more that's going to play more directly into the end times so that we might see an introduction to these things, so that we might see, first of all, more information about those countries, those kingdoms, but also then other images that appear. Then he wrote down the dream and told the sum of the matter. Daniel declared, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea, and four great beasts came up out of the sea, different from one another. Well, let me give you a little insight here. The four winds, those are the ruach, those are the spirits, probably four of the spirits that stand before God's throne. We're stirring up the great sea. The sea is representative of peoples in prophecies. And a great sea would be a great peoples, or a lot of peoples, a lot of inhabitants, a lot of citizens, we might say. And four great beasts came up out of the sea. So these beasts came out of this populace of whatever it is. They're all different from one another. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. Then as I looked, its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man. And the mind of a man was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second one, like a bear. It was raised up on one side. It had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And it was told, devour much flesh. After this I looked, and behold, another like a leopard, with 4 wings of a bird on its back. And the beast had 4 heads, and dominion was given it. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another horn, a little one, before which 3 of the first beasts were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. As I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, and his hair of his head like pure wool, and his throne was fiery flames. Its wheels were burning fire. A stream of fire issued and came out from before him. 1,000,000 served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. I looked then because of the sound of the great words that the horn was speaking. And as I looked, the beast was killed, and its body destroyed and given over to be burned with fire. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, there came one like a son of man. And he came to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. As for me, Daniel, my spirit within me was anxious, and the visions of my head alarmed me. I approached one of those who stood there and asked him the truth concerning all this. So he told me and made known to me the interpretation of the things. These 4 great beasts are 4 kings who shall arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, forever and ever. Then I desired to know the truth about the 4th beast, which was different from all the rest, exceedingly terrifying, with its teeth of iron and claws of bronze, and which devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. And about the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn that came up, and before which 3 of them fell, the horn that had eyes and a mouth that spoke great things, and that seemed greater than its companions. As I looked, this horn made war with the saints and prevailed over them until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given for the saints of the Most High, and the time came when the saints possessed the kingdom. Thus he said, as for the 4th beast, there shall be a 4th kingdom on earth, which shall be different from all the kingdoms, and it shall devour the whole earth and trample it down and break it to pieces. As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings shall arise, and another shall arise after them. He shall be different from the former ones, and shall put down 3 kings. He shall speak words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and shall think to change the times and the law, and they shall be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. Okay. Hopefully, you know enough about the book of Revelation that you're seeing these images and these things of this fourth beast. Okay. Tell me about this fourth beast. He was awesome in his appearance. He had bronze claws. He had teeth of iron. He had all of these things. And then we'll get down to a time, and half a time. Hopefully that's familiar to you. If not, we'll see it as we get into our study. Trying to introduce this, I'm trying not to be too mysterious, but I would have to teach you the book of Revelation for you to understand all of these in a satisfactory manner. But a time is 1 year plus 1 year plus 1 year plus 1/2 a year. If you add those up, I'm good at math. It's just the numbers that give me trouble. That would equal 3 1/2 years. Does that number sound familiar to you? How many years does the tribulation last? That's known as the time of Jacob's trouble. Who's Jacob? Israel. Okay. The time of Jacob's trouble. We know it as the tribulation period. Okay. And we know the first half is referred to as the tribulation, but there's another half that's referred to as the great tribulation. The first 3.5 years of the tribulation period tribulation period and the great tribulation, 3.5 years, 3.5 years. The dividing line between the tribulation and the great tribulation is the abomination of desolation that I mentioned in previous studies. That's when Antichrist sets up his statue. Sound familiar? People love statues, right? In the Holy of Holies. This first 3.5 years here, and well, let me digress a little bit. The original title for this week's study was The Rapture. Okay? Because I was going to begin my study or my teaching on the rapture. But I kept discovering so many more things that I decided by the time I had created all of my slides for that study, I need to go back and redo this because it's not adequate. There's more to the story than I have provided in the lesson. But from what I am aware of at this point, the first 3.5 years begins with the two witnesses, commonly thought to be Moses and Elijah. Okay. I have two others that I'll bring out when we actually get there, and the reason why that they might be the two witnesses. This period here of tribulation is looked upon as a time of peace for Israel. Okay. We know all the things that are going on in the world because we have studied the 7 seals of the first couple of chapters of the judgments in Revelation, chapters 5 and 6, chapter 6 really. We studied the 4 horsemen and all of that. There's a question about when that takes place. Let me show you another approach to the tribulation. We'll call this the abomination of desolation, the midpoint. This would be the great. This would be the regular. Okay. Most of your modern authors, Tim LaHaye and several others who teach end times prophecy, start the tribulation period with the white horse. This is trib and this is great trib. Okay. And there are others that started, as I showed previously, with the, I'll get there eventually. Wherever I've put it now. Well, that's a different one. Oh, well. Others started at the 2 witnesses. There are others that started with different things, different events. And that's part of the dilemma of studying the rapture because there are various theories, some with good documentation for the various starting points of the tribulation. There's one that I use. See if I can get there. that says, and I started working on this last night in preparation for a future study, that the seals, the thunders, the trumpets, and the bowls are all describing the same time frame. It's a theory called recapitulation. And the reason that scholars came up with the theory of recapitulation is because there are many times that the same thing happens with each of the seals compared to each of the thunders, compared to each of the trumpets, compared to each of the bowls. So if you were to put them side by side, like in a chart, which is what I was doing last night, if you would list them down like this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and compare what's in them, you can see the similarities. You can also see similarities in the pronouncements of the judgments. The kingdom of our God has come. And there's still more, like 6 more chapters afterwards of things happening. So there's good evidence that there is recapitulation that's taking place. Not enough evidence in my studies yet to adopt it as my theory for the book of Revelation, but enough that it needs to be studied more in depth. It needs to be determined. I did find an author a couple of days ago who is what I would call a semi-recapitulationist. He has objected to the ultra recapitulation theorists and said, yes, there is some recapitulation that John uses in the apocalypse and in the Revelation, but that it's not all recapitulation. So that's what I'm doing now in preparation for our rapture study, is trying to determine if recapitulation is valid, because if it is, that's going to change where we place different events. And where we place these different events is where we will determine where raptures take place. Now, in the Hebrew, and I have new study resources. One I received Friday, and then another one that's coming, probably won't be here for a couple of weeks, maybe a month, depending on shipping from Germany. But in the Hebrew, these are called what we call rapture, is known as harvest. So if we determine that, let's just say that this is, let's call it seal 4. And seal 4 is the same thing as thunder 4, meaning they happen at the same time, that now changes the chronology of the book of Revelation and where you would put a harvest. Okay. So let's say that I was certain that that harvest number 2 took place after Thunder 4. That's purely speculative. That's not what I think at all. I'm just giving you an illustration. If harvest 2, rapture number 2, and I'll have to tell you this, because there are 4 harvests in the book of Revelation. So which rapture is which? Whose rapture is whom's? Okay. So let's say I think that harvest 2 should be right here and who those people are, but I was convinced that it followed, I said thunders, let's call it trumpets. Trumpets 4. And now I learned that trumpet 4 goes with seal 4. That changes the placement of the harvest or the rapture. So that's what blocked my original 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teaching on the rapture. Had it all figured out. No problem. I can lay this out for you exactly as it should be. And then this came along and caused me to have to do deeper study in order to determine where the various harvests or raptures are going to be in the book of Revelation. I've also discovered new insights into, well, there are 2. Let's go ahead and do that while we have a few minutes. There are 2 major approaches to the rapture in current thinking. Okay? There are several different rapture theories. There's the post-millennial, that everyone is raptured after the millennium, after the 1,000-year reign of Christ. There's one that is premillennial, which means it happens at the beginning of the millennium. Then there is, and I'm simplifying these, then there is the pre-wrath. These are pre-mill, post-mill. Then there is pre-wrath, and this one right now is the dominant one. And it is dominant predominantly. I'm clever when I do those puns like that. It's dominant predominantly because of a rejection of the pre-tribulation rapture theory that has been around for the last couple of 100 years, but has been replaced by probably the majority of the Bible colleges and seminaries and new books that are being written about all of this. But what I'm looking at now is that there's a lot of error in interpreting these. These are pretty well disproven. I mean, these are out of the picture, really. But there is a lot of error in these 2 because of a misunderstanding of kingdom versus body of Christ. Okay. So a lot of things are applied to the pre-tribulation and the pre-wrath that belong to the kingdom, and that skews the understanding of pre-tribulation. Remember how I told you that the book of Romans was written to 4 different groups of people, and that made the interpretation of what Paul was saying in the book of Romans difficult, because sometimes he's talking to one group and sometimes he's talking to another. Well, the same is true in the passages that refer to the rapture, and so that makes it kind of confusing. So that's where we are. So let's get back here to where we were. Okay. So these are things that this this beast that arises out of the sea is a dominant force in the book of Revelation that we'll be studying when we get to that point. So part of the understanding of this beast is, where does it fit? Okay. So that's what brought me to that rabbit trail off to the side there. Okay. But this is what this beast shall do. But the court shall sit in judgment, and his dominion shall be taken away. What court do you think that is? We've studied it under the terms divine counsel. Okay. And his dominion shall be taken away, to be consumed and destroyed to the end. And the kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. Okay. So we know what kingdom that is. His kingdom shall be an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. So this is the final kingdom, the one we know as the millennium. Okay. And here's what Daniel says about it. Here is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts greatly alarmed me, and my color changed, but I kept the matter in my heart. These visions of Daniel play an important part in our understanding. Get rid of that D. An important part in our understanding of the revelation, and therefore the end times. Next week, we will see the vision of the ram and the goat, Daniel's prayer of his people for his people, and the interpretation of his vision following a clash with the benei Elohim, who were attempting to prevent the messenger from bringing it to Daniel. Then we will begin to incorporate it into the revelation. You see, this message of Daniel, because it's so important to the understanding of the end times and what takes place, there were watchers, not the holy ones, but the evil ones, who were sent to intercept the angel, the messenger of God, who was bringing the understanding, the interpretation of Daniel's visions from arriving, to prevent it by stopping it. As a matter of fact, the one messenger was held up for 3 weeks. For 3 weeks by one of the satanic watchers. And so what we will see is that in the affairs, in fact, these watchers are named. One is the, whoops. prince of Persia, and another one who is on the way to reinforce the prince of Persia. It's called the prince of Greece. Okay. These are the upper echelon watchers who sit over nations. Remember, I told you demons want to indwell people. Devils, which is what these are, devils, fallen Elohim, who did not cohabit with women, so therefore they're not in Tartarus. Their function is good or bad, good messenger or bad messenger, good watcher or bad watcher. Remember, the King Nebuchadnezzar started, a watcher, comma, a holy one came to me. So there are both. Well, these are evil watchers. I think we saw them in Enoch. And we'll get a hint because it's revealed by the messenger who's speaking with Daniel, says, the prince of your people, Michael, is fighting with me to stop these bad watchers. Okay, so we know that they are assigned to people, to groups, to nations. One to Persia, to Greece. There's one for all of the nations. For each, I shouldn't say all of the nations. There's one for each of the nations, and probably then sub watchers, lesser watchers, who are in charge of various aspects within those nations. Okay, so that's what we'll see next week, which will lead us then into further study in the book of Revelation after we see that. So hopefully this has been enlightening. I know that because it is portions of that puzzle that I've dumped out of the box, that you can't see the whole picture. To teach the whole picture would be, well, it's going to take a long time. So you'll have to recall, and you'll recall if you review what we study in each of the lessons, so that you'll be able to, when you put one section together, you might be able to put together a corner, call this the puzzle, and you might be able to, from what I've said today, you might be able to put together this corner right here. And then when I give you some more next time, you might be able to fill in this corner. And then you'll be able to fill in between, and then you'll be able to expand, and you'll see more and more of the picture as we put it together. What I will try to do is tie this piece that we did today with the next piece, the next section of the puzzle here, and then tie that to the next one, and tie them together as we go, so that you don't have to wait for the entire puzzle pieces to be put together in sections to be able to see it. So that's how we will proceed to try to get all of the information down that we need in order to be able to understand all of this. This book of Revelation has perplexed people, believers, since the beginning of the 2nd century. And I have read, I don't know how many books, how many commentaries, how many articles, who have the craziest information in them about who this is, who that is, what this means, all of that. And as I said, it's been perplexing for everyone down through the ages until we get to the point that we can see it clearly. And I'll tell you when that is. That's when it has happened. Then we'll know. Okay. Like I told you about the prince of the power of the air and the rulers of the age when Christ was walking the earth. And Paul said, had they known, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. And I told you at that time that because in the Old Testament, the Tanakh, it was never revealed in one place all of the understanding of who the Messiah would be and what he would do. And so they did not know. It's part of the questioning of Satan of Yahuah in the wilderness was he was fishing for information by quoting passages in the Old Testament that the answer to which that Jesus gave would have given him insight into how to deal with Jesus. Another interesting study that we'll have to look at sometime, what he was trying to find. But just as there was no clear message for them to understand so that they would have not crucified Jesus, because that was part of God's plan, it was never laid out the way so that they could be clearly understood. So that's what was the way it was laid out. Well, the same is true with the end time study. There are things that are not given in clarity, because if they were, Satan would know how to deal in the end times in a better manner, in a more appropriate manner to be able to defeat God, to win his case. And so that's why you have these mysterious prophecies, but they all, when we look back at them from our perspective, become clearer. But I don't think that they will be totally cleared up until after it happens, and then we'll be able to see it. You have people now who are saying all kinds of things about where we are in the book of Revelation right now. And it makes no sense whatsoever that they would say that. Okay, so let's close, and then we'll take this up again next week. Father, we're grateful for our time together to look at your word, to be able to study, to be able to gain insight into the information that we see in your word so that we can put together the puzzle of the end times. I ask that you show us as we read, as we study, and as I teach, how they fit together so that we might have more and more clarity of mind as we look at these things. We ask that you bless our time and bless those who participate in the name of Yahushua HaMashiach, Jesus, our Savior. Amen.